All right, good evening. Um, I said we weren't going to do the ages, but we're going to go ahead and go through them. The ages for the diagram on Genesis 5. We saw that diagram of the ages, really. This matter of Seth being the appointed seed, that seed being a frail mortal man named Jesus, is from the beginning called in the name of the Lord, who, although existing in the form of God, emptied himself, and he became humble and obedient unto death, and that the death of the cross, as we see with Canaan. He was resurrected and ascended as the Christ, made Lord in Christ in his ascension for his glory and resurrection, and praise in his ascension, singing the name of Hallelujah, and descended upon the church on the day of Pentecost, and in the house of Cornelius for the Jews and Gentiles to form one body. This descending is Jared, and the church began, was formed, and we see the window of it in Acts 2:42 continues steadfastly in teaching the fellowship of the apostles. The continuing steadfastly is dedicated teacher, fellowship, walking with God. This is Enoch as a seed of the church life. He is also the principle of the rapture of the first fruits, and he's prophesying, naming his son Methuselah for the building up of the church. Prophesying builds up the church. Methuselah means when he dies, he'd be sent. And then when Methuselah dies, the flood came, which is the principle of the man-child. The man-child are the dead overcomers, and when they are formed and the woman who gives birth is ascended to the throne. And Satan is cast down, as we see in Revelation 12, not cast down as Lamech, bringing in the kingdom rest, which is Noah, meaning rest. Okay, now that we have that key, we're going to go through the years that they lived. See, I think just Satan doesn't want me to do this, so we're going to do it now. And we will see. Mike, what happened? Oh, Lord Jesus. All right. How long they lived, who they begat, how long they lived after they begat, and how old were they when they died. We see besides Enoch and Noah, these they all died at a certain overcall age. But we also Enoch actually had an age of 365. 365. All right. So let's start with Adam. So Adam lived 130 years. He begot Seth. 130 is 10 times 10 plus 30. You can break it up as 130. 10 times 10 is the fullness of the times. 30 is 3 times 10. 3 is the triune God. 10 is full responsibility, bearing the full responsibility throughout the fullness of the times. Adam is the overall picture here. But what did he do at 30 years? He begot Seth. He begot the seed, the appointed seed. The appointed seed to bear the full responsibility of the triune God. So it was 130 years he begot Seth. After Seth, he lived 800 years. 800, when you see 8, new creation, you see 9, kingdom. 800 would be the bringing forth of the new creation. This appointed seed will bring forth the new creation. And the fact that it's the individual Christ who is the fulfilled promised seed, and the corporate Christ, which is together is the new creation. Now, Adam lived to be 930 years, 9 being the kingdom. This is actually for a matter of the kingdom of the triune God bearing responsibility 3 times 10 for the bringing forth of the kingdom. So you look at how long he lived, who he begat, how long he lived afterwards, when he died. It's this overall view, and we can also use these numbers to kind of unlock some more numbers coming up here, as much as people lived and died. So 3, triune God. 10, fullness. Also 10 is full responsibility. 10 times 10, fullness of the times. 8, new creation. 800, new creation, the fullness of the times. The fullness of the times meaning the fullness of the ages. There, you can think of each age as a 10, but in the fullness of the time, when the time came for Christ to become that, instance, that could be 100. Now, the millennium will be 1,000, which is 10 times 10 times 10. And where to me see that 3, it is the triune God, but it's also the 3 groups of people in the millennial kingdom, which are the nations, Israel and the church. All right? Okay, let's go to Seth now. And again, these are all really educated guesses. I think unless I present this, we're not going to get anywhere as far as figuring it out. So we're going to present it, but please comment down below. Tell me what you think. All right. All right. Now let's get to Seth. Seth lived 105 years and begot Enoch. What is Seth? Seth is the appointed seed. It's the promise. It's not the fulfillment. It's up to appointed time. It's not the fulfillment of the seed. So there's 5. When we see 5, it's bearing half of the responsibility. 5 is responsibility, but we do know bearing half the responsibility for the age, which would be 10, 10, the fullness, right, of that age, of the times, right? So Seth is appointed, but it's not yet fulfilled. So 105 years, now he begets Enosh. After 105 years, he begot Enosh, and after Enosh, he lived what? Well, Enoch meaning frail, mortal, fragile man, which is referring to, if we look at the diagram, the incarnation of Christ. Now, after Enoch, he lived 807 years. We can break that up as 807. 7 is the completion of God's move in time to get what he's after. And 800 is a new creation in the fullness of the time. So this is God's move in time, of course, completion to bring forth the new creation. Okay, so God, the story of God is really the Word, which was God, became flesh, Enosh, frail, mortal, fragile man, to bring forth the new creation at the completion, right? Not the fullness of the times, but for the completion of God's move in time in the old creation. That is 7. So kind of look at our up there. You got to, by the way, these first 3 are actually the most difficult. I'm still kind of farting around here. But now, how long did Seth live for was 912, which you can break up as 9 and 12. 912. So it's a matter of bringing forth the kingdom. How? By God, by the mingling of God and man. Christ, who, when God was incarnated, remember, um, at the point of time was ultimately to bring forth the kingdom was be the mingling of God and man. By God meaning 3, man being 4. 3 times 4 is 12. Now look at 7. It's 3 plus 4. So 7 is in the old creation to bring forth the new creation, and then ultimately the kingdom, which would be the mingling of God and man at this appointed seed. All right, let's go to Enosh. Enosh lived 90 years and he begot Canaan. And remember, Canaan is the human living, right? Well, although Christ came born of a woman, born under law, Enosh, right, the incarnation, we realize it's short of the fullness of the times that God was speaking to, which would be the bringing of the next age. He still was on this earth for 33 and a half years, so he was still, there was 10 short of the fullness, right? 10 short of 100, which is 90. You could, I kind of see it kind of like that a little bit. It's not yet to his resurrection, death and resurrection. Not yet what he would accomplish, right? Although the story of God as God became a man, it's not yet there at the completion of the fullness of times. It really is not until his death and resurrection that the age, that fullness of the times from the promise in the law, promise 10, law 10, 10 times 10, something like that, is 100. But it's not yet there yet. It's 10 short. It's still short of the fullness. And he brings forth Canaan. Now, how long did he live after Canaan? Canaan, of course, he means their smith, humble, obedient unto death. And after Canaan, he brings forth Canaan. He lives after he brings forth Canaan, this frail, mortal, fragile man, 815 years, which you see 15 is half of 30. It's half of the triune God's responsibility. There still needed another responsibility here to match the fact that he wants to bring forth a new creation. 815. You kind of follow me? So it's not 830. Wouldn't be that. We will see that Mahalalel did live 830 years after he begot, but that's after he became through death and resurrection to become the spirit. But here's 815, 15, half of that. Now, what's the total of Enosh? Is 905 years. Again, we had this number 5. We needed another half to bring in the kingdom. It's one thing for God to become a man named Jesus Christ, but Jesus Christ needs the church. He needs his counterpart for the kingdom. He needs that other 5. And he needs to go through death and resurrection. Perhaps these 5s here, for the 15 and the 5, have to do with the triune God bearing responsibility himself to not only become a man, but to go through the process of human living, death, and resurrection to bring in that other 5 or the other 15, something like that. Okay. A lot of guesswork there. Just put that out there. All right. Now let's get to Canaan. Canaan is representing the human living and death. So he lived 70 years and brought forth Mahalalel. Mahalalel means the resurrection and ascension. Well, up to the resurrection ascension, it was 70, a completion of time in fullness, right? Where up to the point of his death and resurrection was, in this sense, the 70, right? Brings forth Mahalalel, the death and resurrection. Now, after he brings forth the death and resurrection, Canaan lives 840 years. Now, 40 is a matter of trials and testing. You realize, when was that? That was during the Lord's human living and death, Not the resurrection. Canaan's not the resurrection. It's human living and death. So 40 trials, testings, right? To what? Bring forth the new creation, 800. And then what? The fullness, okay, then what? He died at 910. So Canaan in totality, representing Christ's human living and death, is what? The fullness. I wouldn't say, well, in a sense, it's a full responsibility to his fullness, but it's also full responsibility to bring forth the kingdom, because he is the kingdom's seed in that sense. but to bring forth the kingdom, because we're still not at the resurrection and ascension. It's not as easy as it looks. But if you break that up, you can kind of see more and more if you look at these names. I have it right here, and I just been kind of going through and just kind of seeing a picture here, using the names and what they represented it as far as the story of God and His purpose is concerned in the diagram. All right, let's go to Mahalalel. Mahalalel lived 65 years and begot Jared. Now, 65 is 5 short of 70. Now, I like to look at the 70 weeks of Daniel as the total of the consummation of the ages. The consummation of the ages, it's 5 short. We will see another 65 here with Enoch, showing that there's a need for another 5 to consummate the age. Mahalalel represents the resurrected and descended Christ, which is the consummated spirit. But the kingdom is really the spirit and the bride, the spirit, right? The keen and the dumb. Well, half of that is the spirit. So we're at 65, we're still needing the other 5. Notice Enoch, who represents those walking by the spirit, in a sense the first fruits, in a sense the bride, in a sense the dumb of the king, for the kingdom, has that other 5 for the consummation of the 70, which we see as the 70 weeks of Daniel, to consummate the age. He brings forth Jared. So that is death, that's resurrection, ascension, the consummated spirit, right? Poured out to what? To live 830 years after that. That is the triune God bearing the full responsibility to bring forth the new creation, is the matter of 830. Sounds like I said that same thing before, but I didn't. 30, triune God bearing full responsibility, right? The fullness, right, of the Spirit, full responsibility to bring forth the new creation. On the one hand, we are the ones who need to cooperate, and as the other half of that responsibility. On the other hand, He is the Spirit. All that you need is in the all-inclusive dose and all in the Spirit from the new creation, something like that. Now, Mahalalel lives to be 895. So again, here we have the 5 short of 900, the kingdom. He needs the other 5 to bring in the kingdom. He is the king, He is the Spirit, but He needs the other 5 to bring in the 900. 9 times, we saw 9 being this matter of the kingdom. So we're going to see this other 5. We will see this here with Enoch, but maybe something like that. Okay, now let's get to Jared. Jared means descending. So this is a matter of the application of the consummated Spirit among His people. And we will see this is a matter of new creation. But look at this. He lived to be 162 years. Now go back to that story of Daniel. That story, the prophecy of Daniel in the 70 weeks split up to 7, 62, and 1. But the first 7 have actually nothing to do with the new creation. It actually has to do with the old creation, this matter of the decree of King Cyrus to go back and rebuild the temple, the completion. That's 49 years, which is the first 7 weeks. From the completion of the temple to the cutting off of Messiah was 62 weeks. So you can think of the cutting of Messiah as 62 weeks. Well, then 3 days later, resurrected, right? And then 50 days later, on Pentecost, He was poured out. So in a sense, it's the 62 weeks. I know it's up to the Messiah, but you can kind of include it all because this is a matter of the starting of the next age. From the 7 weeks, then 62 weeks, so it's actually 69 weeks to the 70th week is the age of mystery, which started on the day of Pentecost, being poured out in the New Testament age. The descending, right? The Jared, right? See what I'm saying? 62. And He brings forth Enoch, right? So up to that point, when He poured out upon the people, and there was Acts 2, and Acts 2:42 lining up with Enoch, continuing steadfastly teaching the fellowship of the apostles. After that, He lived 800 years. 800 you can consider as this entire age of the new creation. Now, I know the new creation, it goes on to the kingdom and New Jerusalem, but this is for the formation and the bringing forth of the new creation, not just in the Lord's resurrection, but amongst the church, the people. The Lord is the element of the new creation, right? All right. Now, He lived to be 962 years. So 62, again, is this age. 62 means the beginning of this age. Not this age, but the beginning of this age. You can think of the 800 years as the begin for that age, but 962 years, the beginning of this age for ultimately bringing forth the kingdom, starting with the descending of the Spirit from the throne, right, to the kingdom, right? It's between 69 and 70, but in this case, it's a matter of 62 because it's referring to the 434 years from the temple to the cutting of Messiah, 62 years, which was also the 69th week. Bringing in the 70th week, right, which would be the last 7 years of this age, right, And so in between there, we have Jared. We have this matter of the poured out Spirit in this New Testament age, the age of the church, the age of grace, the age of mystery for the bringing forth of the kingdom, 962, something like that. Enoch. Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. Again, Enoch represents those who are bearing the other half of the responsibility of Mahalalel. Mahalalel lived 65 years and begot as the Spirit. Enoch, who walked by the Spirit, walked with God, right? The church, right? Together, Spirit and the bride, is the other five of that 65. And that fact that he lived 65 years for the 70, the consummation of this age, right? And he begot Methuselah. When he dies, he'll be sent. So it's the entire age of grace here. And he was not, God took him. Well, what was he not? He lived 300 years after he begot Methuselah. That is the triune God bearing the fullest responsibility. 10 times 3, right? Walking with the triune God, bearing the full responsibility. He lived 300 years and then walked with God, it said. So then his total is 365, which is bearing the full responsibility to walk with the triune God for the consummation of the age, as the other half, the counterpart of Christ, the Mahalalel, the Spirit, and that being the bride. And then he got raptured, the first fruits. Okay. Now he begot Methuselah. Methuselah means when he dies, he will be sent. And so Methuselah is this matter of not just the man child, but it's for the judgment of things. Now, how long did he live before he got Lamech? Was 187 years, 13 short of 200 for a full testimony. That 13 could be the flesh, dealing with the flesh, and begot Lamech for the casting down of Satan. On the one hand, the old man's crucified. On the one hand, Satan's been cast down. But on the other hand, he still needs to be cast down as the practical application of dealing with our flesh, 13 short. Now, he lived 782 years after Lamech. Now, 82, I always looked at this. It's not 9 times 9. It is 41 times 2. 41 is short of 42. 42 months is the Great Tribulation. Lamech being cast down starts the Great Tribulation. And he's still, but at the 42nd month, the end of the end of the end of the end of the end. So it's not quite the 42nd month, the 41st month for testimony, 2 times 40, 41, something like that. For the completion of God's move in the old creation as far as time is concerned. That's why it's 782 years. Now, how long did Methuselah live? He lived 969 years. Remember, that is one short of 70. When he dies, it will be sent. It'll be the last week of the 70th weeks, the last 7 years of this age. When he dies, it will be sent. Now, we always think about the Great Tribulation being sent, but in a sense, the Great Tribulation is included within the last 7 years of this age, that 3.5 years, included within the last 7 years of this age. Something like that. So as you can tell, there's a lot more digging that needs to be done here. We're still not done, though. I know that. We still got Lamech going on here. But I just got to put it out there. There's the way you kind of look at this, and if you can use that diagram, perhaps somebody could crack the code on all this, but that's kind of what I'm looking at here. Now look at Lamech. Lamech lived 182 years, begot Noah. Again, Lamech is this matter of the casting down of Satan, this dispensational instrument to begin the Great Tribulation. 82 is 41 times 2. It's to bring in the Great Tribulation, but it's not to bring in the 42nd. It's 41 all for the Great Tribulation. The 42nd month will be the end of the Great Tribulation. That's why it's only 41 for the casting down of Satan, starting the Great Tribulation. There's 41 months, something like that, for the fullness of the times. 10 times 10, 182 years. And he begets Noah, meaning rest, or the kingdom, right? So it's up to that point. If you kind of follow the 70 weeks of Daniel and the chart that you have in your recovery version at the back of the end of it, you will see. All right. Now he begets Noah, and then he lives 595 years, 5 short of 600. 6 is the man created on the 6th day who fell, the fallen man, right? Antichrist will be 666 here on the Great Tribulation. So it'll bring us right to the point of the very end of this age with 5 left, another responsibility, which is the open coming of the Lord. It's like that's as far as man can to bear the responsibility to deal with fallen man, 600, and you're seeing another 5, right? You need the coming of the Lord in an open way to complete that for the judgment of fallen man. Now, Lamech lived to be 777 years, which we saw is for the ultimate justice and righteousness and vengeance that started with the other Lamech, really, who turned the rule of law on its head and went all out. If somebody wounded him, he killed him. If somebody struck him, he blew him away, whatever. And so if Cain's avenged 7 times, Lamech 77 times, but now this Lamech is 777. God's saying, well, I now need to put another 7 to that Lamech, you see. It's not just if anyone kills Cain, sevenfold of vengeance. That's the rule of law. But Lamech, the Cain descendant, says if somebody strikes me, I'm going to kill him. That's actually unrighteousness. That's a vengeance. That's a usurpation of the rule of law, and that's a vengeance of another 777. Or I'm sorry, 77. Right? Then God comes in and says, no, this Lamech is the casting down of Satan to avenge the avenger. To make it right. 777, seven being the completion of time and the consummation of this age in some ways. Something like that. Okay. And now that brings forth Noah, 500 years old. Noah is the rest, but it's 500. It's half of 1,000. Remember, the millennial kingdom is 1,000 years, so perhaps this is like the bearing of a responsibility to bring forth Noah. But Noah, we will see as we get into the next video here on Genesis 6, that the other part of the responsibility is he actually had to have a life and a work, a building of the ark in order to turn the age and bring in the kingdom. So he's only 500. He needs the other 5, right? He needs that other responsibility to bring in the millennial kingdom. Kind of something like that. Okay. Well, that's that. I guess we can do another video. I'm just glad I got this out there. I know it's probably not even 90%. I mean, I'm just kind of looking at these ages here with the diagram, and it kind of works like that. The more you look at it, the more you see it, to see how long they lived, to bring something, lived afterwards, and then the totality of what they are in their living. I mean, as far as how old they were when they died. Well, anyways, I appreciate you guys' patience and sympathy and mercy that I didn't get all that really completed. I've been kind of looking at it for a while, but still not there. But hey, that's okay. That means there's more to go. So hopefully somebody sees this video and maybe they can crack some more codes here, because there is something here. We just have to pray for light and revelation and praise the Lord. All right, well, that will do it for Genesis 5. We will start Genesis 6, next Genesis reading, with the third fall of man, the Nephilim, the sons of God, the fallen angels, having intercourse with the daughters of men and producing the Nephilim, these super giants. Should be fun. Where man indeed becomes flesh, the third fall. Other than that, thank you for today's Genesis reading, and put that with your diagram. And again, make a diagram like this. Use the diagram from yesterday, right? And then make a diagram like this. You see how I have living, who they begot, they lived, they died. Do something like that, and then kind of put it with the diagram, and then use the story of the Bible and the vision of God's economy, which is God becoming a man, right? Living on earth, death, resurrection, ascension, being poured out as the Spirit, the consummated Spirit, into man and upon man, for man to be mingled fully with God. This is the church to bring in the kingdom. Okay? Hold those principles, and there should be something there more clear. Other than that, praise the Lord. Thank you for your patience. Bye-bye.